was one of our witnesses who did come in, who's not a family member, did come in and see part of Ms. Albright's testimony. What he would be testifying to would not be connected to it. And I do apologize that it was one of my witnesses, and it was someone who I met with over the phone. And I probably should have emphasized more that order, but I just want to bring that to the court's attention about that. And that would be Sherrod Howell.
All right. Will state wish to be heard on that matter? All right, very well. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. We'll just move on. If you'll go ahead and bring jurors, please. Further evidence for the defense?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense will call Pete Rich.
Would you place your left hand on the Bible and raise your right, please? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated.
Ms. D.
Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Pete Rich, and well, my position, I'm the director of the Wright School.
Okay, so can you tell us all a little bit about what the Wright School is?
Wright School is a state-run facility for children with severe behavioral and emotional disabilities. Kids come to us for about 6 months. We're diagnostic in nature. So the idea is to come to us, it's residential Monday through Friday. Kids go home on the weekends. We're working with parents. We're working with the child to kind of help them be a better fit in their community and their schools. And then if everything's going well, we turn them back to their home communities.
And you say if everything's going well, but generally do students stay for 6 months?
Yeah, 6 months. So if everything's going well, if we have had cases, not many, where kids don't go back to their home communities, or they might go to a private residential facility or something like that.
But they don't stay with you?
They don't stay with us.
So that their time with you is never extended beyond the 6 months?
6 or 7 months, there's a little leeway, but not much more than that.
And you mentioned that you're a Monday through Friday program,
right?
That the students go home on the weekends.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it? Can you tell us a little bit about what kind of structure is in place there at the Wright School?
So many of our kids come to us and have a lot of executive functioning deficits, so have a hard time with impulsivity, on planning, looking, knowing cause and effect, that sort of thing. So we remediate that with a really structured day. So every minute is planned. Kids get up. We start every day with, this is the planning board. This is what we're going to do today. We have a point system where kids get feedback on their behavior, starting at every 15 minutes when they come through the door. we go out in the community, but we have licensed teachers who are teaching Monday, teaching 7 to 2. We have a licensed teacher teaching from 2 till bedtime. They have assistants there with them. We have 24 kids at a time. Each group has an assistant and a lead for a day shift, an evening shift, and then we have awake overnight folks as well.
So there's some sort of check-in with the students every 15 minutes throughout the day?
Yes, we're giving them feedback. So there's a point sheet, so we'll say, you're doing a great job, you're earning your points. Our goal, most of our kids feel pretty worthless, so we are working to make them see what they're good at. So we do a lot of positive behavioral supports.
And so it would be safe to describe the environment there as a very structured environment?
We as structured as you're going to find in the state.
And then you said that there is an effort to be coordinating with the parents.
Yes.
And so how does that tie in to the weekend time work?
So we have, as well as having a day teacher, an academic teacher, an evening teacher, we also have a liaison teacher, and that teacher is a licensed teacher, but does his or her work is with the parents in the community. So we do a good job making great change with the families, with the kids, but if we don't make change in the homes, then it doesn't do much good because their kids are going back. So we have teachers who their job is to work in the home.
And because that's a critical piece?
That's a big piece.
Because
it's the most important piece.
The most important piece is for there to be some level of structure in that home?
Yes, and so our hope is to help folks get that structure there.
And do you remember Travion Smith?
I do.
And what age would he have been when he was at the right school?
I believe he was 10. It was 2004, and at that time I was the day teacher, so I was his academic teacher.
So you're the director there now?
Right, but I was at teaching then.
Okay. So in a slightly different role then?
Yes.
And as his day teacher, what hours would you have been with him each day?
Every morning from 7 till 2, Monday through Friday.
And how do you remember Travion?
He was a great kid. He did really well in our program. He came in. He was one of the most impulsive children I've worked with, but he loved the structure. He cared about other kids. Again, he would impulsively make poor decisions, but showed regret afterwards. He had empathy with other kids, which is unusual for some of our kids. That if you've had a lot of early trauma in your life, that sometimes your ability to see folks from others' points of view is damaged, and it's hard to get that back. Travion cared a lot about the kids and had good adult skills and was funny, but really impulsive, really active guy.
You say really active. Is that one of your strongest memories of him?
Yeah, that he was always smiling, that he was really fidgety. We worked with him so if you're sitting in class and you're banging your books because you're fidgety, you're going to get in trouble, but if we give you something to hold in your hand, you figure out a way to do that, you're going to get in less trouble. So I remember working with him about figuring out how he could have a fidget in his hand that didn't distract everybody else in the classroom, that sort of thing.
And did he seem to want to please the adults that he was interacting with?
He did. He's always craving attention. Working with him and figuring out how to get that positively and using his strengths, his sense of humor, his intelligence to try to be a leader in the group and not bring the group down was part of the work we did. But he was always willing to please.
You mentioned being a leader in the group and that being something that you worked on him with. Was that something, was there a reason that would need to be worked on?
I think his impulsivity would get in the way of having consistent relationships and figuring out how that impacted him and how do you recover from that and how you talk with friends and how you keep those friends. It's part of our program. So we're doing that work. He wasn't the only one who was dealing with this issue. So as you go through our program, we're pushing you, how do you be a leader? How do you set a good example in a group? How do you participate in a group? That sort of thing.
And the core of that is having better social skills.
Yes.
Because without those better social skills, you can't ever develop those more sort of advanced skill sets.
Exactly.
Did Travion, in the course of time he was with you, did he earn any awards or any sort of?
So in our school, so we work with lots of kids whose kind of first response to stress is aggression. So you can imagine if you have a whole school full of those kids, you have a lot of aggressive incidents. And so unfortunately, we have times where teachers have to physically intervene with kids. And we also have timeout rooms where kids who are a danger to themselves or others kind of go to calm down. And Travion was one of the students who went through our whole program the 6 months he was with us and never needed to be physically restrained or use the timeout room, which is a big deal. We give an award every week for kids who are able to solve the problems without having adults intervene. And then when you graduate, we have a big plaque on the wall that's for folks who never had to have adults help them solve their problems through physical intervention or else using the timeout. And he was in 2004. I looked at it before I left today. He was one of 10 students we served probably 50 students in 2004, and he was one of 10 students who got the Pruitt Award.
And what's it called again?
It's called the Pruitt Award. It's named after a student who came through and was able to go without using timeout, and his dad thought that was cool, so he's going to give an award to every kid who did it after him. And so we've continued to do that.
And you mentioned that it's there at the school. Is there some sort of plaque or something?
There's a plaque on the wall that has his name, that when he graduated, part of his graduation ceremony was that we put his name on the plaque and hang it on the wall, and he gets a part to take home with him.
And that was you said he was there about 6 months?
For 6 months, yes.
Without having to have any trips to the timeout room or any physical intervention by teachers?
No, with a group of children who were spending time trying to make kids get upset. I mean, that was why they were there. So it's a challenging time. It's an unusual thing.
With a group of kids who all had sort of behavioral and emotional problems?
Right.
I don't have any other questions.
Cross-examination, Ms. Shakita.
Mr. Rich, was it your understanding that one of the people that wanted the defendant to come to your school was his father?
I wasn't the liaison, I was the teacher, so I wasn't involved so much in the admission. I know his father was present in part of some of those meetings. I wasn't there.
And then we've talked about Travion having an IEP for the educational time periods that we've talked about. He had it when he was at your school, and I imagine everyone at your school has one. Is that correct?
Yes, well, pretty much, yes.
Okay. And with that, the dad would come to the meetings when asked?
Again, the way our school is set up, as a teacher, I would do the academic goals, but the liaison would be the one running those meetings. I would come in and talk about the goals, but I would only be in one of the meetings. And I can't tell you whether I remember his dad. I would assume his dad was there, but I don't have a memory of it one way or the other.
That wasn't
my role.
Okay. And he was one of the kids that you said was the leader in the group.
We worked, the time he graduated, so kids come in once, so we have a kid come in once a month, we have a kid leave, like kid graduates, new kid comes in, so you always have people kind of building through the program, so you always have kind of veterans and you have new people, and so as kids get to the end, we work with everyone to take on a leadership role. That's the senior Eagle. He was in a group called the Eagles.
Okay.
So you're the senior Eagle, so you would have a personal goal to show good leadership, to be a positive example, that sort of thing. So that was the program for all the kids.
And when kids come to the right school, there's sort of an initial assessment and then an assessment when they leave. Is that safe to say?
There's an initial assessment, and then really the work we do, we're diagnostics. After about 4 months, we're going to have a good sense of what the child needs and how they're going, and then the rest of it isn't like you have to get to a certain barrier, like to graduate, get to a certain plateau. It's we know what we think is going to help you, and then working with the community and the homes to get those things in place. So I don't know if I answer your question.
Yeah, I might not have used the right words. Before, the goal of the right school is to focus on the individual's issues, whether they're educational, whether they're behavioral, or a combination thereof, and then discharge them back to, I don't mean regular school, but a more mainstream school.
Yes. The idea is that typically when kids come into us, they're on kind of their interaction with their family is on a kind of negative trajectory, their family, their school. And then when they leave, it is our hope that it's on a more positive trajectory and they have some tools to deal with what's going on.
And based on what you saw in the defendant's case, he had made that kind of progress such that he could be transitioned back.
Yes.
And I might have said a reevaluation, but there's actually what's called a discharge summary before
Yes. Yeah, we write at the very end, this is what we learned, and if you want so-and-so to be successful.
And
Yes,
in
sir.
that discharge summary, did you have opportunity to kind of review that? I know you said you reviewed some records.
I don't know that I reread his discharge summary. I've looked at the plaque on the wall.
But but in regards to the discharge summary, if it said, with external structure and motivators, Travion was more able to successfully manage his ADHD symptoms, which seemed to contribute greatly to his behavioral difficulties. Would that be
Yeah,
the way you saw him?
Yeah, that sounds,
And in terms of, you said he had gotten to a good place where he could work with his peers, and I think that you said, and I don't know if you said the word remorseful, was that what you said, if he had gotten into something with someone?
I said he was able to show empathy. I found that if he was, my memory is that he was impulsive
Empathy.
and did something that later on down the road, he felt bad about it and wanted to figure out a way to fix that problem. And that's not typical for all of our kids.
But in that discharge summary, it also says that Travion struggled with being able to assume responsibility for his actions and behavior. He was able to manufacture excuses and rationale for his conduct quickly. Is that how you recall some of his concerns?
I would say that those are still ongoing things. We don't think we're fixing children, and we don't want to write that this is no longer a problem. But he had made lots of progress towards that way. But yeah.
And one of the things in the notes in the discharge summary, there's a section where it talks about opportunities to lead.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that's one of the things that you work with the children on,
Right.
is that right? And the first thing it says is Travion enjoys center stage. Is that your recollection of
Yes.
when he leaves? Again, we're at the discharge part.
Yeah, he enjoys attention. Yes.
And with respect to sort of the discharge or putting the children back to the mainstream, you also want to have the family involved. They're involved all along, but specifically with how to move progress forward.
Yes.
And so would they have also been a part of kind of, here's the progress we've made, here's what we think will help in the future?
Yes.
And for example, in the discharge summary, you would have told, does this sound right, that you would have encouraged them to use positive comments when Travion would do something positive?
Yes.
Much like the system you had gotten
Right.
involved. And at that point when you're meeting with the family there at the end, do you address concerns that they may have in terms of behavioral issues in the home?
I would think so.
Okay.
Again, that would be the liaison in doing those meetings.
But you actually sign off on the discharge as the day teacher counselor.
Right, so the academic part was the
Yeah.
part that I wrote.
I don't have any further questions.
Redirect?
Briefly.
Yes, ma'am.
So, Mr. Rich, there are a lot of aspects to what goes on at the Wright School, and you were involved with some of them.
Yes, ma'am.
And there are two, I think, assessments that were just being kind of referred to and talked about. Do you remember, or is it the standard practice at the Wright School to have something called a re-education assessment
Yes.
and then a discharge summary?
Yes.
So those would be sort of the two assessments.
So you would come in and there'd be 2 weeks of kind of standardized testing, intelligent testing, achievement testing, kind of that kind of stuff, plus maybe I think in 2004 we might have been doing executive testing, executive function testing, behavior scales, that sort of stuff. And then we all meet to help formulate a treatment plan once we get all that testing in to decide where we're going to head.
Okay. And you don't make that assessment until you do all of that testing?
Right.
And look at all the information that you had previously?
All that we can find.
There are academic issues that have been talked about, Were you one of the people that was involved in trying to come up with a way to handle the night terrors that he had during the time he was there at the Wright School?
In the sense that I came in at 7 and was talking with as part of a team, yes. Yes, that was, it feels like, and I might be wrong, it feels like it wasn't the whole time, but maybe getting closer to discharge, that cropped up, although he had a history of that, I believe.
And closer to the discharge, it was an increased problem?
I think so.
And after you had the ability to do all of the, and you told us earlier that for the goals that you're aiming for at the Wright School to be met, having that sort of structure in the home is critical.
As far as we can go, yes. I mean, we have a kind of time limited, we're state run, we have a time frame that we can get, kids can be with us 6 or 7 months, but we have some responsibility to the state. So we're pushing families as far as we can, and communities and schools in that time.
And
but yes.
And looking for what the best options are going to be for each individual student when they leave the Wright School.
Yes.
And when you finished the re-educational assessment for Travion Smith, after doing all that testing and looking at all those other issues, is there a section at the end of that that's called the interventions and services?
Yes.
And those are interventions and services that are sort of recommended by the staff there?
Yes.
And do you recall that for him, the number one recommendation after that process was residential treatment?
Yeah, that would make sense.
And Ms. Shakita asked you a few questions about sort of leadership. And is that something you work on with all of the kids?
Yes.
Because they don't have those basic skills?
Skills, exactly.
And so the goal is to help them with those?
Yeah, and it's the process of time helps build that. So if you're one of the people who've been there a lot longer, kids are going to look up to you naturally. So we have a nice way to help kids explore that, what it's like to be a good leader. And then they've watched the people in front of them do it and the people in front of them do it. So there's a pattern and a model. So that is a goal we work for with all kids.
I don't have any other questions.
Ms. Shakita?
To be clear, when Ms. He was asking you about the re-education assessment, that was initially in the beginning when he came, that you
Yes.
were talking about residential treatment. And then towards the end, do you recall a recommendation being made, the therapeutic wilderness camp?
If that's in the discharge summary.
Well, and it is.
Okay.
But that also is residential, but kind of a different kind of treatment modality.
Yes.
And I had asked you this before. May I approach, Judge?
Yes.
I'm going to show you page 6, which I'll mark as S4 for identification purposes of the discharge summary. And I asked, and again, you didn't have a whole lot of the contact with the parents, and you said it would have been sort of the liaison.
Right.
But in the top here, does it not say during Travion's stay at Wright School, his father, stepmother, Michael, and Jackie Clark have been active participants in his treatment team, specifically with Carissa Trotta?
Yes, who
And
was
that-
the liaison, and that would be the section that she would write.
Okay. All right.
All right, thank you, sir. You may step down. Please. Further evidence for the defense?
Oh. Oh, yes, we call Warren McDonald.
Come on up, sir. Can you put your left hand on the Bible and raise your right hand? Please solemnly swear the testimony you give this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
That's what we got, yes.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. McDowell. Could you tell the jury your name?
Warren McDowell.
And how do you know Travion?
I used to be his middle school math teacher at Longview School.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you some more questions about him in a moment, but I'll get some background about you. Where do you live?
In Johnson County.
And how long have you lived in Johnson County?
About 24 years.
And you said that that you currently look at Longview School?
Correct.
How long have you worked at Longview?
This is my 20th year.
And where did you go to college?
East Carolina first. I always say that that's where I learned about who I was. And then NC State, I learned about what I wanted to do in life.
And what degree did you get?
Got a master's master's in education with specifically with behaviorally and emotionally handicapped kids.
And well, tell us about what is Longview School?
Longview is an alternative school that supports and helps students that may have some difficulties making it in the regular school, whether it be certain behavior patterns or just having a difficult time. So there's a lot of paperwork that's involved. There's a lot of teacher interventions. A lot of things have to be tried before a student comes to Longview School. And for a student to get there, it requires all those things to take place. Some kids come from another program in the county, and so by default they come to Longview School that way, whether they come from like the 5th grade up to 6th grade in the middle school, so they don't automatically have to go through all that paperwork, depending on if they're in that program.
And is Longview just a middle school? Is it a high school too?
It's a middle high school combination. Very few kids go there. It's not like a big school.
About how many kids go there?
At this point, I think there's probably only about 50.
And how many kids would you normally have in each of your classes?
Anywhere from like 3 to 12. It's been as high as 12, but that's a rare. 3 to 8 is probably more typical.
Was one of your students Travion?
Yes.
Do you remember when you taught him?
I think I was doing the math before, but it's somewhere around like the middle 2000s, somewhere in there.
Where was he in school? Was he in middle school? Was he high school?
I had him in middle school. I was his teacher in middle school, but he then went to the high school as well.
Okay. So he was in your class for 3 years?
Yes.
What was he like when he was in your class?
He was silly. He was like a lot of kids are at that age. Never aggressive, never intimidating, very impulsive. I'm not sure he was able to see the consequences of his behavior a lot of times when he would just do something. But he was a student I enjoyed having in class.
Did you ever have him say a crossword?
No, never. And you have to understand the kind of school Longview is. I can say this for only a few kids. And I spoke at a graduation a couple of weeks ago for one of those other kids that was in that handful, but I never heard a crossword from him. I never got any blatant disrespect from him. If he was disappointed about an expectation or something that was happening in the classroom or a direction that I gave him, he might walk out of the room, but there was never any aggression or anything like that. And even that was rare.
Is that unusual for the kids that you teach?
Yes, very unusual.
I think you were saying there's only a handful of kids that like that. You said he was impulsive. Can you explain that?
If he thought about something and it was going to be fun to do, he kind of did it without thinking about about what may happen, about that he would get in trouble or that I would have to explain to him, this might be where you're headed if you go down this road. Think about those things.
Did you ever see him do anything aggressive?
No, never any aggression, and that's another thing that's kind of rare at the school I work at. Usually kids there will communicate with their aggression sometimes to show their displeasure or to show, that they're not happy about something. But that was never Travion. Never aggressive, never even used his physical proximity to intimidate.
What do you mean by that, physical proximity?
To kind of force somebody to do one thing or another, or think one thing or another, or manipulate people or the environment.
Did you ever see signs, did he ever seem depressed?
Yeah, I would see him with his head down a lot, but so then me being the teacher at Longview, when he came into my class, I always made it a point to encourage him. I always made it a point to make his day better, because that's part of my job. That's part of what I do when I'm there at Longview. And he was one that I wanted to make sure that his stay there or that class period, my math class was a math class that he'd be happy in, that'd be something that he could enjoy that day.
Did you ever see, from seeing him in class and everything, any signs that he seemed to be immature for his age?
Yeah, like I said, there would be some silliness, the laughing, that kind of thing, which I don't know if it's real immature for kids in middle school at that age, but I would think maybe with him it was a little more so.
Any examples from you seeing him with other kids and all, did he seem to be a follower or a leader?
Definitely a follower. I never saw him like in the hallway between classes say, "Hey y'all, let's go do this. Hey, let's go do that. Let's go do something that's maybe not appropriate or something he was going to get consequenced for." Somebody else would do that, and then he might see that as something fun and then go in that direction. And then that's the time when we would process with him, this is probably not a good idea because, you're going to get in trouble, you're going to go down to the principal's office, you're going to get a write-up or something like that.
Did you ever have any contact with his father, Michael Clark?
Personally, I can't tell you that I can't tell you that I remember having personal contact with him.
Did you, from your work in school, any impressions about Michael Clark?
No.
Any idea whether he was supportive of his son in the school? Or?
I know that in IEP meetings, when we had him for Travion, we would get this wonderful news that he was in a program where he was starting to really respond well to, and then we would have another meeting not too far later, and he was being pulled out. And I was wondering, well, how is this happening? He's being successful. Why is he being pulled out of this? And I can't tell you if I remember who was doing that, but I just had a feeling that it was a pattern. It happened more than one time.
And who would pull somebody out of a program?
Well, I mean, parents are the only ones that are able to do that, because they're the ones that are making those decisions.
If I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
Mr. McDowell, just so I'm clear, you had him from 6th to 8th grade in math.
Correct.
And so during the rest of the day, he would interact with different teachers.
That's correct.
Okay. And so you said that you never saw any aggression or impulsive behavior. Is that correct?
Correct. That's correct.
Were you aware that in the 6th grade alone that he was...
Objection. If he's not aware, well...
Judge, they've opened the door.
Overruled.
Were you aware in the 6th grade in December of 2004 that he was suspended for fighting with a student?
No, I don't remember that. I'm just being honest.
No, absolutely. And so were you aware that he was suspended in January for punching a student and re-engaging after being pulled away?
I don't remember that.
Were you aware in February that he was suspended for 2 days for pushing and hitting a student?
No, I don't remember those.
And then again in April, were you aware that he was suspended for a day for pushing another student?
No.
Similarly, going to 7th grade, were you aware that he had gotten into an argument with a student, came back to school and fought with a student, being suspended for 2 days? in May of 2006, were you aware that he punched a student and was suspended for 3 days?
No, actually, I'm not, and I'm surprised by that.
That Travion struck a boy named Justin with his fist. You don't remember that in May?
No, I don't.
And your testimony is that part of his impulsivity in terms of what he would do is if he thought something was fun, he would do it not thinking about the consequences.
Correct.
Okay. Were you aware that he had an IEP, or do all the kids at Longview have IEPs?
At Longview, yes, they all have IEPs because they all have those intensive behavioral patterns that we work on.
Right, and that's the whole point of an IEP, and that's the whole point of your school, is to help individualize students' behavior.
That's right, that's
behavioral
exactly
needs.
right. That's exactly right.
And were you aware in his IEP for the 6th grade that teachers had indicated that Travion can be argumentative and belligerent and will display aggressive behaviors towards peers? Do you recall that?
No, I don't.
And do you create his IEP?
I'm part of it. I'm part of that plan, yes.
And so you don't recall that being built into his 6th grade IEP?
No.
And in 7th grade, and is the goal, again, to reevaluate, typically annually, how things are going and figuring out if you need to tweak it a little bit. Do you recall in the 7th grade that it being added into his IEP that he has a problem remaining focused and is distracted by the slightest distraction?
I don't remember that specifically, but that is how I remember him.
Him, okay. And that sometimes, in the next sentence, is he's usually wasting time doing things other than what's instructed. Do you recall that as well?
I don't remember it specifically, but again, that's how I remember him, how I characterize him.
And then after he leaves the middle school, the 8th grade, do you have any more interaction with him?
I don't unless I see him in the hallway.
Sure.
And I did a couple of times.
But when he would go to high school, he would have a whole different set of teachers.
Correct.
And when he started Longview in the 6th grade of the middle school, were you aware of kind of what his grades were at that point?
I'm sure I was aware at the time. I just don't remember him.
Would it... aware in at least in the beginning of the 6th grade, carrying towards the 8th grade, that his grades got continuously worse. Is that your recollection?
No, that's not anything I remember.
Okay. But you would have only been responsible for math.
Correct.
I don't have any further questions.
Redirect.
Is it unusual for kids at Longview to be suspended?
No, what we try to do is work with the child, work with the student with the behavior, work with the student's conflict with other students, and find another alternative rather than suspension.
But suspensions do happen there.
They do happen, yes.
When you're talking about impulsively, he would follow along with people impulsively
Yes.
with it. And Ms. Shakita talked about him sort of being easily distracted and all. That doesn't surprise you, does it?
No, that's what I remember about him.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Anything further, Mr. Kidd? All right, thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and break for lunch at this time and resume at 20 minutes past 2. If you will recall all the instructions, don't talk among yourselves or with anyone else about the case. Don't form or express opinions about the outcome. No media or independent investigation in these matters. No conversations with parties, witnesses, or lawyers. If you leave your notepads, and again, 20 minutes past 2 in the deliberation room, please.